Hey, I'm Warlord James from ArmchairWarlords.com. This video is going to be a brief introduction and review of the Warhammer 40k role-playing universe developed by Fantasy Flight Games. The first thing I'll go over are the 5 different product lines that they've put out for this universe. The first one was Dark Heresy, which is a game about playing acolytes for the Inquisition. And you can play any of the 3 Ordos of the Inquisition. It's got some pretty interesting gameplay revolving around rooting out heretics or heresy, either from Xenos or from inside the Imperium or from Chaos forces. The next thing to come out was Deathwatch, where you get to take on the role of Space Marines in the secretive and small Deathwatch chapter that's operating out of the Jericho reach of the universe. That game revolves around battling all types of enemies, any types of threats to the Imperium that exist inside the Jericho reach. The next game to come out was Rogue Trader, and Rogue Trader, you get to take on the role of a crew on board a rogue trading space vessel. So you go around to new and unexplored areas of space looking for lucrative opportunities or for potential new threats or discovering new worlds entirely. So that game's got a lot more imagination in it because you can pretty much invent the gameplay as you go along. The next game to come out was Black Crusade, where you get to take on the role of Chaos forces, and you can either play heretics or Chaos Space Marines. In this game, you're pretty much going around the universe causing trouble. You're operating either out of the Eye of Terror or the Hadex Anomaly, anything that gives you easy access into the realm of chaos. If you want to explore your dark side at all, it's an excellent game to do it because you can do some pretty evil things, and your characters are very powerful and they can get away with a lot of stuff. So it's a really fun version of the game. And the last and latest one to come out was Only War, where you get to take on the role of Imperial Guard forces. You can engage in battles all across the galaxy, just furthering the Imperium's will and taking the light of the God Emperor to all the corners of the galaxy. Our Fantasy Flight has produced several different types of products to go along with these games. The first thing, obviously, were the core rule books. These are some pretty thick, glossy image books. They've got some impressive artwork in them. They have very good explanations of the rules, and you can pretty much get everything you need to get started with the game from there. They've also produced lines of adventures and campaign settings that you can pick up that give you pretty in-depth descriptions of long adventures that you can play through with all the different various product lines. They've also put out quite a few chapter and equipment supplements that give you new pieces of war gear to work with. They give you new vehicles that you can acquire, new support systems that you can call in when you need help. And also they've put out a lot of Xenos material, which will give you new enemies to face, new threats to try to root out, and also there's additional chapters of Space Marines that you can play, and different types of units that you can engage with or even play as in the game. And also they've produced some products to help with game masters, such as these game master screens. They're quite useful. You see they fold down into a single book-sized page and they open up. They've got impressive artwork on the outside, and they've got extremely useful tables on the inside for the Game Master. And there's a Game Master kit that's been produced for each of the 5 product lines of the game, so that'll help out the Game Master. It gives you some quick rules for getting started, and also it gives you a brief adventure to play through to get your players used to the game. And the game's based on a mechanic that's a little bit different than what you might be used to from tabletop role-playing games. All the dice rolls are D10s and D100s, and sometimes D5s, which is just a D10 with the result cut in half. So all you need to really play the game is every player needs to have 2 dice. And these 2 dice will determine all your statistical outcomes, as well as you can use the D10s to roll up almost all of your damage. You also generate characteristics with these. Everything is done with just 2 dice, so it's a pretty simple system as far as dice rolling is concerned. Also, one difference with this game over most other fantasy role-playing games is that use the metric system as opposed to customary or imperial systems. All the measurements and ranges and distances are in meters and kilometers. Also, one thing that we like about it is it uses hexes instead of squares. So if you want to play on a battle mat, you use 1 meter hexes as opposed to the 5-foot squares that you might be used to. It's a little bit different, so it's a little bit of a learning curve, but it doesn't take long to get used to it. And you'll find that it actually works out in some more realistic combat movements while you're fighting. And also, one cool thing about the game is that it works with the Games Workshop miniatures, and it's actually based off the tabletop miniature wargame rule set, with some obvious modifications, of course, to make it better for role-playing. But you can also use those miniatures that you've bought and purchased to play with your 40k tabletop wargames. You can use them to represent your players or even enemies on the battle mat. Alright, some of our thoughts on the game system in general. One thing we've noticed is that the Deathwatch version seems to be very popular. If you want to get into that, just some notes. You're playing a Space Marine, and just as in the lore where Space Marines are, virtually walking demigods, you pretty much take on that role in the game as well. You can almost do anything you can think about, and you're pretty hard to kill. So, it's fun, and you get to monster most of your enemies, but at the same time, it has a tendency to get a little too easy. It can lose some challenge if you don't have a good GM who's constantly presenting you with unique types of challenges. Or possibly testing the skill sets of your group members. And along those lines, you'll find that the Ceramite power armor that's supposed to be invincible, it is invincible to most Imperial or human-made weapons, but when you run into Xenos, they tend to be able to cut through it a lot easier than you might think. One other thing too is if you want to play a librarian character or a sorcerer, these are the magic casters of the game, or any of the acolytes, say from Dark Heresy, that can use psychic powers. The way the rules are built in these mechanics, the psychic powers are almost unlimited, meaning that you can just fire them off without thinking about it, especially if you're a Space Marine, that you don't suffer from the effects of fatigue, which are supposed to kind of check the use of psychic powers. It doesn't really work out in terms of actual gameplay. So librarians and sorcerers can tend to get a little overpowered. In testing that we've done, we've run across hordes of 80 to 100 enemies. A single librarian can make mincemeat out of them in a matter of a few rounds. So that's one thing. It's still fun to play them, but if you're a GM who's worried about presenting significant challenges to your enemies, you might have to think harder about how to challenge the psychic power users. One of the other things that we noticed was that with a lot of fantasy role-playing games, characters are driven by acquiring gear or loot or material wealth. That's not as big a factor in these games. Not to say that it doesn't exist, because it does. You can acquire some pretty powerful items, but sometimes your character may not be able to hold on to them for more than a single game session, or you have to acquire the renown or the rank to be able to have the right to use this equipment. And the equipment is kind of sparing. It's one powerful piece here, one powerful piece there. There's not a lot of small-scale loot to worry about acquiring, and unless you're worried about accumulating throne guilt in the Dark Heresy version of the game, or acquiring that in the Rogue Trader version of the game, in some of the other versions, you're not going to be satisfied with the amount of looting that you can do. If that's not something that's important to you, though, then it works out just great, because you don't have to worry about inventory management and encumbrances and things like that. They aren't a big factor in the game. One other thing, in any version of the game, you do get a true sense of being on your own against overwhelming odds. A lot of the adventures that are pre-written, as well as just the game mindset in general when you're reading through it, you're going to be in a single team or a single squad. You're going to get dropped off probably in the middle of nowhere or behind enemy lines. You're going to be with very little support, so you're going to have that true sense of feeling like you're standing alone against a very powerful foe. But at the same time, the way the game mechanics are built, it's usually very rewarding, because even though you're in those overwhelming odds, if you're smart about how you play, you can very easily achieve victory most times. So you'll get a big payoff because you're going into a very difficult mission, but you've got a good chance of success as long as you play smartly. And lastly, the lore for the game is all based off the Games Workshop licensed 40k universe, which has been contributed to by numerous authors over the years. It's been growing for decades. It's very well developed. Most of the books are very true to the lore that's out there, everything that's considered canon. So there's a significant amount of fiction that you can just engross your characters into. Players who are interested in role-playing in this universe can have a very satisfying experience. They can get very deep into the politics and the mechanics of how the universe works under Imperial rule, interacting with various Xenos races, with the Inquisition and other Space Marine chapters as well, and can be very interesting, very exciting games. Alright, so this has been our segment introducing the Warhammer 40k universe created by Fantasy Flight Games. In the future, we'll put out some individualized videos that go over each of the 5 product lines and tell you how to design characters and how to get into playing the game, and give you some hints and tips about how to master the gameplay experience for yourself. If you like this video, remember to hit like down at the bottom and subscribe to our channel, and we'd appreciate some feedback. We do pay attention to it and we do respond to it. And also you can follow us on Twitter at AC Warlords, or you can check us out on Facebook at Armchair Warlords LLC. I'm Armchair Warlord James from ArmchairWarlords.com, and thanks for watching.